Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into the science of social rejection by looking at a fascinating experiment that, well, didn't exactly go according to plan. And you'll see why that's actually a good thing.
All right, let's just start with something we all know, that feeling. You send a text, you post something, and then crickets. It's that tiny physical pang of being ignored. We've all been there. But what is actually happening inside our bodies when our social world gives us the cold shoulder?
You see, that's the exact mystery scientists are trying to unravel. They want to literally measure that feeling, to finally understand the connection between our social lives and our physical health. And this is especially important for young adults, right? That's a time when social feedback can feel like, well, everything.
To even begin to measure a feeling, they look for something called a psychophysiological response. Now, I know, it's a mouthful, but all it really means is your body's physical reaction to a thought or emotion. You know, your heart rate speeding up, your palms getting sweaty. If they can capture that in a lab, that's the first clue they need to crack this case.
Okay, so to get this investigation rolling, the researchers needed a tool. They needed some kind of experiment that could reliably make people feel rejected right there in the lab. And it had to be way more convincing than just some silly game.
So the team went with a pretty advanced tool called the Chat Room Interact Task, or CIT. Now, older methods, like this thing called Cyberball, were basically just a digital game of keep away, not very personal. The CIT, on the other hand, was designed to be much more realistic, to feel more like a genuine online chat.
And here's how it worked, which is pretty clever. First, you create a profile all about you, your interests, your hobbies. Then you get to see profiles of other participants, and you pick two you'd want to chat with. Then the researcher comes back and says, "Great news, they picked you too." And finally, you're in this simulated chat room where you find out if they actually want to talk to you.
So the trap is set, so to speak. The experiment is designed to create these real feelings of acceptance or rejection. Now, the scientists just had to find the evidence, a clear, measurable signal coming from the body's nervous system.
And they were looking for one thing in particular, something called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, or RSA. I know, another super technical name, but just think of it as this specific signal they're tracking. It's this natural little wobble in your heart rate when you breathe, and it turns out it's a fantastic indicator of how relaxed or stressed out you are.
Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is as your body's own internal chill meter. When you're calm, cool, and collected, your RSA is high. The meter's way up. But when you get stressed, or you're really focused on something, or you feel threatened, that meter drops. So with this chill meter in mind, the researchers had a very clear prediction, a really solid hypothesis. They figured, hey, that sting of being rejected in the chat room is definitely going to cause a stress response. It's going to make that chill meter, the RSA, drop way more than it would if you were accepted. Makes sense, right?
All right, so the stage is set. They ran the whole experiment with two different groups of students, and they're carefully watching that chill meter data come in. They're crunching the numbers, and they are fully expecting to see their hypothesis confirmed.
So this is the moment of truth. Did this fancy, personalized chat room experiment actually work? Did getting rejected cause that physical, measurable pang of stress?
Well, the results were really surprising. Look at these numbers. The average chill meter reading when people were accepted was 6.73, and when they were rejected, it was 6.68. I mean, from a statistical point of view, that's nothing. The needle barely moved. The rejection just didn't seem to register as a stressful event.
But here's the real kicker. This is the big twist in the investigation. The lowest reading on the chill meter, the most stressful part of the entire experiment, wasn't getting rejected by fake peers. Nope. It was sitting there at the very beginning, filling out questionnaires about their own feelings and anxieties.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The scientists themselves had to write it up. In their own words, the experiment basically raised some serious doubts about whether their high-tech tool was even valid for this group of people.
So what happened here? What went wrong? Why did this task, which was designed from the ground up to feel personal and meaningful, totally fail to move the needle on stress?
Well, the researchers had a few prime suspects. For one, maybe the whole simulation just wasn't believable enough for savvy college students. Or maybe the stakes, being chosen for a 5-minute online chat, just weren't high enough to really matter. But the biggest clue? It seems like answering deep questions about their own feelings was actually more mentally demanding and therefore more stressful to the nervous system than the social task itself.
So ultimately, the verdict was in. The evidence didn't suggest that the students were reacting weirdly. It pointed to a critical flaw in the experiment, in the tool they were using. For this particular mystery, They just brought the wrong piece of equipment for the job.
But this is the beautiful thing about science, and this is why this story is so important. An experiment that fails like this is not a failure at all. In fact, it's a huge discovery that tells us something incredibly valuable.
What's this number? 0. That's the number of times the researchers found any connection between how anxious or depressed a student said they were and how their body physically responded in the chat room. Absolutely none.
Finding what doesn't work, what scientists call a null result, is a vital part of the process. It's like putting up a giant sign for all the other scientists out there that says, hey, don't go down this road. We already checked. It's a dead end. And that saves everyone a ton of time and money.
And more than that, this whole thing just shines a massive spotlight on how hard it is to study real human emotions. Think about it. Our feelings are all tangled up in real stakes, in our personal histories. Trying to recreate that raw, powerful feeling in a sterile lab where you know you're being watched is almost impossible. It's kind of like trying to study a lion by watching one nap at the zoo. You're seeing the animal, sure, but you're not seeing its true wild nature.
And that leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. If a lab experiment that was meticulously designed to feel real doesn't even make a blip on the body's stress meter, what does that say about the real power and the true impact of the acceptance and rejection we all deal with every single day in our very real digital lives?